So I can just start and welcome everyone to this edition of our Substack show. And we decided, the team at Couric Media and I decided we were really going to focus on immigration because so much is happening. And there have been a lot of people wondering how what's happening on the streets of America is actually legal. And Todd, if you want to pull your phone down just a little bit, you've got a massive amount of headroom. And Todd was telling me, everyone, that his mom bought the portrait of John F. Kennedy at an estate sale, I guess in 1963 or something. Right?
Yeah, it was painted. Let me see. It was painted in 1964.
1964.
She didn't buy it then. She bought it maybe 25 years ago.
Oh, nice.
So she gave it to me when I graduated from law school, and it's been hanging in the office ever since.
That's nice. And I know you said that it reminds you of her. So that's a very nice thing for you. And Todd is coming to us from Boston, everyone. And as we're getting more people joining us, we're really going to take a look at what's happening vis-a-vis immigration in this country. And the reason why we asked Tom to join us is he's representing someone named Ani Lucia Lopez Baloza. Ani is a 19-year-old college student who was detained by federal agents at Boston's Logan Airport when she was trying to fly home to Austin, Texas to surprise her family for Thanksgiving. She's a student at Babson College in Boston, and Todd handles a lot of immigration matters like deportation defense, and he has extensive experience advising non-citizen clients about deportation or the denial of citizenship. So we asked Todd to join us to really tell us Ani's story, what happened to her, and if it's illustrative of what's happening to other people around the country. So this story broke, obviously, Todd, over the Thanksgiving holidays. So why don't you start by just telling everyone what happened when Ani went to the airport, to Boston Logan Airport, to get on a plane to surprise her, I guess her father and her sister in Austin, Texas for Thanksgiving. And if you're just joining us, I mentioned Ani is a student at Babson College in Boston.
Yeah, that's correct. And thank you so much for having me, Katie. This is, what happened it's because with Annie, she's a scholarship recipient at Babson. It's a school maybe 12 to 15% of students get accepted at. And she's studying business. She's got a bright future ahead of her. She's a dreamer. And she's been here since roughly 8 years old. Her and her mom crossed the Mexican border, was fleeing persecution in Honduras and seeking asylum, which is a lawful immigration process. It's really a human right. She's trying to seek asylum in the United States, but she's a child. And she's being labeled right now as an illegal alien, which is the word of the day with the immigration. It just seems like that's all we're hearing out of Homeland Security. You're either a criminal illegal alien or an illegal alien. And then when you peel back the onion, you find that it's just a falsehood. She came through a lawful process to seek asylum. And what she did about a week and a half ago, she was trying to surprise her folks with a trip back home. A lot of college kids can't afford to leave for Thanksgiving. I mean, I remember trying it once, and it was, it's really difficult when you have to board planes and fly around. So a lot of people just have their little staycation with their friends and have Thanksgiving, maybe get invited to, go
a Friendsgiving,
sleep on their friends' couch. So that's usually what it's like. It's hard to go away because you typically come back and then you have finals, your reading period, and then you usually get 5 or 6 weeks off. So a lot of people just don't take Thanksgiving off to see their family. And the only person who knew she was leaving was a family friend, treats him like an uncle. His name's Ricky. He's her dad's boss. Her dad is a tailor. He actually handmade suits for Annie to wear for job interviews and to go to various, internships. The business world, you have to wear suits. I'm on quite a bit. And, she was just really bright-minded, young person. And she goes through, she gets to the airport. She basically downloads her boarding pass on her phone. And then at Logan Airport, it's really busy. She's there early morning. I think she had a flight around 5:30 a.m. the Thursday, the week before Thanksgiving. And then she goes through and security, and she's just waiting to board her plane. And when they eventually call her row to board the plane, they have A, B, C, whatever section she was in, they scan her pass and they tell her something's wrong with her ticket to go talk to customer service. What ends up happening is she goes to talk to customer service and she gets surrounded by agents that have masks over their faces, and they basically arrest her and take her away from the airport, put her in a van, and then they take her to the immigration facility in Burlington, which is a suburb of Boston. That's where ICE's regional headquarters is for New England. That's where all the decisions are made, whether to keep somebody in ICE detention, whether to release them.
This is in Burlington, Vermont?
Burlington, Massachusetts.
Okay.
It's in the suburbs. It's near the Burlington Mall. It's basically about 20 miles north of Boston is where the regional headquarters is for ICE. So that's where all the brain power, if they even have that these days, that's where those decisions are made by ICE. So somebody there made a decision to keep her detained, and she wouldn't sign any documents. She was smart enough not to sign documents. I've had lots of clients go to this headquarters and then basically being pressured into trying to deport themselves. A lot of people don't understand these documents. And what she never understood was why she was in custody in the first place. She did not have any awareness at all that she might have had a removal order. She asked them to show it to her. They refused to show her any paperwork at all justifying her detention. And thankfully, she didn't sign any documents to try to get herself deported, but it didn't matter. She was arrested sometime Thursday morning. I found out about it maybe 10 o'clock Thursday night. A colleague of mine that heard about her plight just reached out to me and said, do you want to take on another case? Because I've had a lot of cases recently in my office where people have been detained, one person for over almost 3 weeks at Logan Airport. So at first I thought she might have been flying back into the United States, possibly a student, and might have spoken critically about, the government. We've had lots of those cases, and we routinely are having these altercations at the airport where Customs and Border Protection will claim somebody's actually not in the United States. So they deprive you access to phone calls, won't let you consult with a lawyer. And we've actually had clients disappeared from the country. We've had people travel without talking to us first. And then we learn a month or two later that they've been deported. They gave up their green cards. One person lost his residency they had for over 40 years. And that was over a dismissed criminal case where we were just waiting for his immigration proceedings to be dismissed. And that person had, Trump fired his judge in his case, and it just slipped through the cracks, and he thought his case was over, and he traveled without consulting us. He's now deported. So this is happening time and time again throughout our country, but in particular, we're seeing it a lot in Boston. And what was very troubling for her is that, Thursday night when we were looking at her case, we were working on from maybe 10 to midnight, it showed that she was in the custody of Boston ERO. So that's the Enforcement and Removal Office. That's what the acronym stands for. So that's like ICE's headquarters where the decisions are made. So that I realized she wasn't in CBP custody anymore. So she obviously had passed through the inspection at Logan. So we didn't file the lawsuit that night. We didn't have enough facts. Friday morning, we gathered more facts. And what we learned is that she never actually traveled internationally. She was traveling literally from Boston to Texas to surprise her family. Her dad got a call late in the afternoon and he thought she'd been deported. He was in tears. I think we talked to him about 4:15 in the afternoon. Earlier in the day, all he said was he heard from Annie that she was detained by immigration agents. So when we looked up in the database, at first it showed she was in the custody of ICE. And then when we reached out to ICE through phone calls and various communications, they just don't answer their phone these days. They don't respond to emails. And then lo and behold, she wasn't in the database anymore. So we thought it was possible she'd already been deported, and then her dad was telling us that he thought she was too. We filed the lawsuit anyway, as abundance of caution, because I was trying to, doing the math, I figured there was a decent chance the plane was at least over the United States. And the way these habeas cases work is when you sue, the key is where the body is at the time. Habeas corpus is Latin. It effectively means bring the body to the court. So a federal judge is saying, bring the body to the court so we can have a hearing about why somebody is being detained. I thought it was unlawful. I still think it is. But what's egregious about this is when we filed the lawsuit at 6 o'clock at night, we call an emergency hotline in Boston, and 8 minutes later, a judge basically shut down the deportation. The judge issued an order that she couldn't be transferred from the District of Massachusetts, but more importantly, shall not be removed from the United States of America while the case was pending, because we have critical issues we're arguing about her detention. For example, if she had a removal order, the government's claiming it's from 2015. That's 10 years ago. You're only supposed to arrest somebody within a 90-day period called the removal period. So that's a violation of a statute. So there are a lot of arguments to be made, but what was clear here was Annie had no idea what was happening to her. Her dad had no idea what was happening to her. She's a child under the immigration laws, and they didn't even call her father to let him know what was going on. And no idea she was visiting. So what a surprise this is. She thinks she's going to go surprise her family with a trip, and now she's sitting in Honduras.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so she was detained at Boston Logan Airport, right?
Yeah.
For how long?
She was detained. She wasn't held there a long time. I think she was detained rather quickly at the airport, and then just taken into the van and brought to the Burlington processing facility.
So how long was she detained in Burlington?
She was there until Friday. So over 24 hours. And that's another issue. It's not supposed to be a long-term holding facility. They're only supposed to hold people for about 12 hours. And we've had clients recently held there for over a week. We represented a bunch of people that were arrested working at a car wash. 9 people got arrested at a rate about 3 weeks ago. And then there was a college student at BU, Boston University, claiming ownership of getting them all arrested, labeling them all criminal illegal aliens again. And none of them had criminal records. And today we got the 7th person out on bond. So we won 7 bond hearings in a row for that case. Again, this propaganda we keep hearing, our clients are either illegal aliens or criminal illegal aliens. So they're labeling a college student right here an illegal alien. And what really bothered me about her case, among other things that are deeply disturbing, is we called Monday just to talk to her dad and just confirm what we thought was true. He told us Friday she'd been deported. So we called him. His name's Francis. And we asked him, have you heard from Annie? Has she been deported? He said, yes, she's been deported. She was deported on Saturday. So I almost fell out of my chair when he said that. I said, how is it she was deported on Saturday, but we sued on Friday? And we had an order from a federal judge stopping her deportation.
So basically, they're just ignoring what the judge is saying.
Yeah, they're either ignoring what the judge is saying or not bothering to read their emails, which wouldn't surprise me because they don't answer our phone calls. They don't respond to our emails. They won't even acknowledge that our clients are in the custody. This has been going on for months. I mean, just today, for example, I had a case that is really disturbing. I have a client who was almost raped leaving TD Garden. She was working there, and she was waiting for her Uber and talking to her roommate. And this guy grabbed her and was, grabbing her, breast and trying to assault her. And the Uber driver showed up and broke it up. And he ran off with her cell phone. And he threatened the friend. He said, don't ever call the police or I'll find you and kill you. He's still on the loose. So my client's been cooperating with law enforcement for over a year, trying to catch this person because he shouldn't be on the streets. It's assaulting women. And there's a serial rapist that's been on the loose for a few years in the Boston area. It's been all over the news. Their reward for reporting this conduct to the police was ice-strapped ankle monitors on them and kept tormenting them. And their child was about to turn 18. He's a senior, not much different age than Annie. And today they put him on an ankle monitor at the same ICE facility and said, thank your lawyers for this. Stop talking to your lawyers. You better listen to us. I just won a lawsuit in joining a policy that caused them to do this. It's called the blind removal policy. And we won this like 45 minutes ago. A federal judge just issued an order trying to prevent victims of crime from being illegally deported while they're going through a visa process that is only available for victims of crime. So it's just time and time again. They're abusing a child today that's 18, tormenting him in front of his mother, telling him, don't talk to your lawyers. Thank your lawyer for this ankle monitor. They deported a child, Annie. We've had trafficking victims get arrested going to their fingerprint appointments in Boston, asylum seekers arrested, people working at car washes thrown in vans, shipped to Texas, shipped to Vermont. And even in Massachusetts, this is really outrageous. They don't have a bed anywhere in Massachusetts, despite this big, beautiful bill, to have a woman sleep at night. They have no bed space anywhere in Massachusetts for women. So I had 2 clients held at Logan Airport. Jamie Rosa, she was on the front page about a week ago of the opinion piece of the New York Times. They almost killed her in CBP custody. And her husband actually worked for DHS for 11 years. And that was his reward for defending our country from terrorists. They almost killed his wife, and he kept trying to get her medication to his wife and kept calling. At one point, the supervisor laughed at him and said, listen, your next of kin will let you know if she dies. And this is what's been going on month after month in Boston and all over the country. Our clients are shipped to Buffalo, New York. They go to Vermont. We've had Good Samaritans find our clients in jail cells, notifying us, your client's in Vermont. I was like, what do you mean she's in Vermont? I thought she was in Burlington. I thought she was in Plymouth County. So people are just being shipped off in the cloak of darkness. Lawyers are not being kept in the loop. And it's moving fast. They're using military jets in Boston at Boston area. There's a base in Bedford, and there's one in Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire. They're using these secret planes to fly people out. People are getting on flights at midnight, 4 a.m. I've had clients arrested at like 5 o'clock in the morning going to work, and they're gone 3-4 hours later. They're in Buffalo, New York, denied access to phone calls. Then they wind up, coincidentally, they always wind up in a for-profit prison in Texas or Louisiana. That seems like the route for New England. Other people, I think, wind up in prisons in Florida. And this is just, and nearly every person I've represented, I've done about 75 of these habeases in our office. Nearly every person we're dealing with does not have a criminal record, or if they do, it's something trivial like, I had one woman recently, Eva Mendes. She's been all over the news. She's from Rhode Island, and she also was held at Logan Airport. But this time they doubled down. They held her for 15 days without charges. And she just left a funeral. She went to Cape Verde for the first time in 40 years to see not only her mom, who she hadn't seen in person, but to bury her brother. And she came back. She has 6 kids that are citizens. And she was held at the airport for 15 days, a week after we even sued them. And their excuse was that our lawsuit caused them to keep her in custody of the airport because the judge said don't transfer from Massachusetts. It's ludicrous. She should have been served with a notice to appear and been brought to immigration court, should have been released from custody at a minimum, and she missed the birth of her first granddaughter. So she misses the birth of her granddaughter. This is a person that had a job 12 years, and a year ago, she went to Bermuda and the Bahamas. Her boss actually bought her a trip because she's such an outstanding employee. So this is a tax-paying mom of 6. This is the birth of her granddaughter. Another child is in college in Rhode Island, and she's still in jail. And she's sitting in Maine, where Jamie Rosa complained, saying they were rattling chains all night long to wake them up. Rats are running around. They're trying to feed people ramen noodles that are diabetics. The car wash woman I talked to, she got arrested on her 45th birthday. And just today, we won bond for her daughter. They separated her from her daughter, couldn't even keep them in the same jail cell together. And she said they were feeding her donuts at the ice facility. Her blood sugar was 600 when she went to Vermont. And this is just, it's just like an assault on women's rights. It's assault on freedoms. And I don't think it just stops with immigration here. This is deeply disturbing trends we're seeing nationwide. ICE doesn't even identify themselves. They have masks over their faces. They look like, they're running around, look like Boba Fett with like backpacks on. It's like all these people, I think, frankly, they couldn't even get in the military. They're just running around playing Rambo on government dime. And it's absolutely unconscionable what we're seeing time and time again. And that's why we have to keep going to federal court, because when is it going to stop? But even a federal judge's order doesn't seem to have meaning anymore if it's going to not be abided by.
Todd, tell me what the latest is. So with Ani, I know she was, or Annie, I think
Yes.
either way. She was deported to Honduras. First of all, she's a dreamer, right? So she is not in the country illegally, right? Under DACA, she is able to be here, correct?
Well, she's a dreamer in the colloquial sense. DACA had a cutoff date. You had to have been in the country prior to June 15th of 2007. She wasn't here then. So she has, but in theory, I mean, she's what we refer to as a dreamer. Somebody who came here through no fault of her own. She's a young child. She came here as, about 8 years old. Her birthday's in January. And she's a recipient of a scholarship at a highly selective university. She speaks English. She speaks Spanish. She understands business acumen. She's really, really bright. And when I talked to her that Monday, a week ago, she had no idea who I was. Didn't even know she had a lawyer. Didn't know we sued. Didn't know a federal judge was trying to offer her, her day in court. It's just is so inexcusable. And then to make matters worse, I was talking to her last Saturday, and I get a text message alert from like a news article, and it says that President Trump is about to pardon the ex-president of Honduras, which is doing a 45-year prison bid for drug trafficking.
Cocaine.
And I told her that, and she's like, "We don't even want this guy here. Are you kidding me?" And I'm like, we're extending that courtesy to a drug trafficking ex-president of Honduras, but simultaneously deporting a 19-year-old scholarship recipient in violation of a federal court order. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's like every day is like The Onion. It's like we don't know what reality is anymore. And
why did can you tell me why her family fled Honduras in the first place, Todd?
yes, there was a lot of gang violence, gangs, if you have a legitimate business, they try to extort money from you. If you're a woman, gang members will say, make sure you date another gang member. If you don't, they'll kill you. They'll rape you. It's really horrible things that were going on. Basically a lawless society they left to then come to a society where the rule of law is supposed to matter. And yet ICE is running around lawlessly. We've had a term for it in our office. We call it terror ICE. That's what they do. They're terror icing our communities.
And were her parents, did they go through channels to become citizens? Tell me about their status.
So Annie and her mom were in the asylum process together. And all Annie ever knew is that, and what her mom told us as well, is that they thought the case ended favorably. They had an attorney that told them, don't worry about anything. You're not criminals. Things are fine. And just left it alone. And I think it's possible that they had a removal order this lawyer never told them about. But again, Annie's a child. So 10 years ago, she's 9 or 10 years old. She's not responsible under the law for even understanding the law. I mean, kids don't understand the law. You don't take a 5-year-old who throws a spoon in a sandbox and like, hey, you'll criminally prosecute them when they're 18 for assault and battery. That's just so obnoxious to even think that. And that's basically what they're doing to her now. They're deporting her at 19. She's a child under the immigration laws, yet they're deporting her anyway. She has no idea what happened to her. They're not even giving her an opportunity to be heard in a courtroom. And this was a discretionary decision. They never needed to do this. Even if she had a removal order, at a minimum, what they would have done years ago, even when Trump was president the first time, is they would have said, look, we have your passport. Go check in at the field office at ICE. We're going to monitor your case. We know who you are. Check in periodically. Go get a lawyer. Let's figure it out, because there've been typos. Like, we had a client years ago. They almost deported over a typo. You can't, and that was, I think, when Obama was president. Just the record keeping isn't perfect, particularly when at airports. I don't know what databases they have access to, but this is the first case we've seen where somebody wasn't traveling internationally that had this happen to them. She
How
was
did
never.
how did they identify her
I
at
have
the
no idea.
airport?
No idea. It was Southwest Airlines. So she basically presented her phone, and they went to scan it and told her, oh, something's wrong with your phone. It's almost like they knew, like maybe there was a message on the screen. We have no idea. We're going to try to get to the bottom of it. But she's, tired. It's like she's there like 4:30 in the morning. Imagine being a 19-year-old college kid. You're about to go home, and you have to, I have a 17-year-old son. It's like I can imagine getting up that early to get to the airport, and then you're there in the morning trying to get on a plane, and then immediately a few minutes later told your ticket doesn't work. She just downloaded the boarding pass maybe 20 minutes before that, and then she gets whisked away by federal agents with no due process. There was no warrant in hand. No, they have their own document they create they call it a warrant. It really isn't. No judge reviews it. It's called the civil administrative warrant. Like, immigration has the authority to detain a person with a piece of paper they call a warrant based on a prior investigation. She never got one of those. They didn't serve her anything. They just grabbed her, and then they deported her.
So I
And
know,
it violated a federal judge's order, which is ridiculous. The rule of law
and
has to mean something here.
so what's the legal recourse if they violate the order? I mean, does that just mean they're ignoring any kind of uh court and any kind of judge's ruling? I mean, what recourse is there in the first and foremost in the judicial system? Any?
Well, there has to be, in my view, because when the judge issued the order and when we sued, she was clearly in the United States. So she was protected under habeas law to have her day in court. And they deported her anyway. This is like, one of my friends had some analogies. Like, he said, I was talking to this lawyer buddy of mine yesterday. He was kind of like, this reminds you of like two people are fighting over who gets to eat a piece of cake. And then one person just eats the cake. It's like, well, what do you do now the cake's gone? It's kind of like this. She had her day in court and they deported her illegally anyway. So we're going to insist that she be brought back here. The plane flies both directions. They flew her to Honduras. Those pilots
She's
flew back to the United States. And we're going to ask the federal judge to require them to bring her back to the United States, because we demand an explanation for a brazen violation of her constitutional rights. Now, one thing, I don't know what the government's going to claim. Are they going to claim they didn't know about the order? They were too busy on Friday night. They didn't read their email. They have 24/7 operation arresting people. They've arrested my clients on the 4th of July, on Mother's Day, on Father's Day, on people's birthdays. The car wash clients we had, one of them got arrested on her birthday and one of them got released on his 20th birthday. So they have plenty of time to go out and arrest people, but it seems like they don't have the time of day to read a court order or follow it. It's so obnoxious and on so many levels, but that's the thing. The rule of law matters. I can't imagine a federal judge anywhere in the country is going to take too kindly to an order being violated, because ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Like, if you drive 20 miles over the speed limit and you didn't know there was a speed limit, you still get a ticket. And it's the same thing here. If they didn't follow a judge's order for whatever excuse they come up with, it doesn't matter. It existed at 6:08 p.m. as a matter of law, not to transfer out of the country. And at 6:00 p.m., the case itself existed. It says bring the body to the court. So she had protections under the law, and it was violated. There's no other way to talk about it. Now, locally in Boston, we have to reach out to our opponent before we file various motions. We have a local rule. You're supposed to basically try to resolve disputes among yourselves before taking it to a judge. I notified the supervisor of the whole U.S. Attorney's Office. Their civil division defends habeas cases. So they knew right away. Like, on Monday when I found out, I emailed them. I was kind of like, WTF, whoa, like, what happened here? This order issued Friday and she got illegally deported Saturday. We didn't know about it till Monday. It never should have happened in the first place. So I haven't received the response yet. Their response is due later this week. They have to respond to the lawsuit by December 4th. So it's going to be interesting to see what excuse they come up with that.
Yeah,
They
definitely
have brought
keep.
clients back, and we've had it happen over the years where people were illegally deported. They brought them back to the United States, and we're going to insist that they do that here.
She's staying with her grandparents, I guess, in Honduras right now. But I wanted
She
to
is.
right? And I wanted to ask you, well, first of all, how is her family here in the States doing?
I mean, they're absolutely traumatized. And, she is as well. Like she seems like she has PTSD. Just talking to her. I've represented a lot of trauma victims over the years. Like, just absolute shell shock. She thinks she's never coming back to the United States. She doesn't even know what hit her. And then she gets a call from a stranger saying, "Hi, I'm Todd. I'm your lawyer. Guess what happened to you? Your rights were violated. And then more importantly, you should speak out about what happened to you." She was very shy at first. Like she has trouble speaking about what happened to her. She's been sharing her story a little bit, and we're going to encourage that she continue to do so. But her case is so unique. So many people are reaching out to us. I've had all these business leaders in Boston, like 15 of them got together. They're like, "What do we do about Annie?" They're all Babson alum. Like they're trying to offer her mentoring. They have a psychologist ready to talk to her about her trauma. All alumni network, just absolutely amazing. This man's name's one of his name's John Atwood, huge business leader in the community. I never met him before, and he just he called me yesterday. He's like, "I'm from a family of givers. Now's my opportunity to give back." He goes, "I read this story. It just absolutely disgusted me." I talked to a major corporate law firm in New York City today, and they want to help. Uh, Senators are reaching out, religious leaders are reaching out, Republicans are reaching out. Believe it or not, people who voted for Trump are telling me, "I did not vote for this. This is not what has nothing to do with securing a border. This has nothing to do with being a fentanyl trafficker or a pedophile or any of this stuff. This is a child who was living her dream, and now she's stuck living in this dystopian nightmare." And she's Honduras. It was actually one of the big law firms. I guess they have a major client who's from Honduras. They're trying to help her out. So many people are offering her opportunities, but that's I guess the silver lining right now is that this story is such an abuse of power that people are just fired up about it for one way or another and trying to help Annie. Her
But
story actually inspired our office. We actually sponsor a nonprofit legal clinic called massdeportationdefense.org. We're trying to raise funds for her and other people. Because so many of these clients we've been helping recently, they don't have money for lawyers. We're a Supreme Court winning law firm. And we never charge anywhere near what we can because this is a yeoman's calling, the type of work we do. It's almost like you're a public defender, but you make a little bit more money. We do it for the right reasons. It wears our staff out. People are sick all the time, need mental health days because
yeah,
it's like
I'm
working in
sure.
it's like
I
working in an emergency room.
Well, I wanted to ask. I mean, this girl, this 19-year-old Babson college student, who, as you said, outstanding, living her dream. I understand she wanted to get a business degree to help her father open up a tailor shop because her dad is a tailor in this country. Sounds terribly dangerous and threatening, doesn't it? But the American Immigration Council said that at the beginning of the second Trump administration, about 1.3 million people had final orders of removal. But many people, and you were mentioning this, do not know that they have these outstanding orders against them.
Right.
Can you explain that just briefly before we go about these orders of removal and how they work and why people don't know about them?
Yeah, what a lot of people don't even understand is the immigration court process itself. It's not a real court. Not to demean the place, but it's a government agency that processes immigration cases. So all of the judges are lawyers that effectively work for the Department of Justice. So that's controlled right now by Pam Bondi. So they can fire you or hire you. So there's always political pressure placed on the immigration judges, and the only protection they really have is a labor union that Trump tried to eliminate in the first couple of weeks in office in 2017 when he was president the first time. So they're effectively government lawyers, if you will, that wear robes, and they can't rule that things are unconstitutional. They basically follow case law and they follow administrative decisions from the Board of Immigration Appeals. That's like the tribunal you go to when you want to file an appeal. Now, issues with these notices, to go to immigration court, you're given what's called a notice to appear. Our office actually won a case in 2018 called Pereira versus Sessions. We invalidated millions of them because the government was too lazy to follow the statute that existed since like April 1st, 1997. You're supposed to put the time and the place and the location on the bottom of the notice. It looks like a summons and it looks like a complaint. It's a notice it tells you your rights. It has like 10 pieces of information. It basically tells you why you're in a removal proceeding, what the allegations are against you, and then importantly, on the bottom, it says when and where your hearing is going to be. So millions of these notices omitted that information. So what was happening a lot is people would come in to seek asylum. They'd hand them the incomplete notice. And then sometimes years later, they'd mail them the notice to go to a court hearing. But people move, mail gets lost. And if you miss your court hearing, automatically you get ordered deported. So a judge just checks a box off and says, you missed your court hearing, you're ordered removed in absentia is what they call it. So hundreds of thousands of people had these notices, and very few of them realized that their rights were violated to begin with because the government never actually served them a proper notice. Annie's case is one of those cases. I saw the notice recently. The notice does not have a time or a place of her hearing on it. So her statutory rights were violated, yet she was 9 years old. How would she know that? She had no idea. Her family had no idea. They had no idea there was even a removal order. I haven't even seen it. I looked her up in the only database I have access to. I typed in her A number, which is kind of like a social security number. It's her file for her immigration paperwork. When we type her A number in, it does not show she has a removal order. So I could never understand why the government kept claiming she had one.
Yeah.
More importantly, she never knew she had one anyway. And she's a child. Like, it's really child abuse. Like what they did to her. And then today they doubled down and they put an ankle monitor on an 18-year-old, rip him out of school and tell him, thank you, lawyers, for suing for you. On a case I won, a federal judge ruled that that person's rights were being violated, trying to deport crime victims, trying to deport trafficking victims, trying to deport dreamers. None of these people are criminal illegal aliens. I mean, I refer to that as like MAGA bingo. You keep hearing criminal illegal alien. It's like almost like an immigration lawyer's drinking game. It's so obnoxious. Like, it's just tone deaf to refer to people as this. Like when you really listen to their stories, she's walking across a border from a dangerous country with her mom for a better life. And she manages to rise to the level of graduating high school, getting a scholarship at one of the top business programs in Massachusetts, and coming to Boston, thousands, very far away from her home, just hoping for the best, like wanting a new experience. And then her first trip back home, she winds up in Honduras in violation of her rights. It's
Are
absolutely
you
appalling.
Are you optimistic, Todd, that you are going to be able to get her returned from Honduras and get her back in school? Certainly, all these people in Boston, it is very heartening to hear that all these business leaders and even corporate law firms in New York City are kind of reaching out to you to help. You would hope that a lot of these other folks who are also facing these horrible situations, there's so many of them, would also have that kind of support. But having said that, do you think she will be returned to the US?
I think she needs to be. Otherwise, the rule of law has no meaning at all. A federal judge said that this could not happen to her as a matter of law, and it happened anyway. Now, this isn't like the Kilmar Garcia case. A lot of people have been trying to draw parallels. I think what was unique about his situation, he was older. He'd been in criminal court before. He knew about his immigration court proceedings. Like he knew the result of those. I think he received withholding of removal. That doesn't mean you don't have a removal order. It just means the government's agreeing not to remove you to a dangerous country. And then, the Trump administration raised the law, from the dead from 1798, calling him an enemy, the Legal Enemies Act of 1798. It's like the greatest hits movement here with all these laws that were resurrecting from the dead. But I think his plane was also possibly in international airspace at the time. That was different. We know Annie was in Boston around the time we sued, or at a minimum en route to Texas. She landed in Texas sometime Friday night. That's the United States. That order is valid anywhere in these 50 states. And yet here we are with her sitting in Honduras. Now, the absence of the business leader I told you, John Atwood, they actually had meetings with the president of Babson. They're going to let her attend remotely. They're agreeing, Mr. Atwood said he'd even buy her the equipment she needs, satellite phones, whatever she needs to do. Just the outpouring of support, it's really tear jerking too. And then just talking, I told her the other day, it's like, sometimes in life, traumatizing things happen. It happened to me when I was young, right? Somebody I loved, taken from me, raked over the coals through the court process. And at the end of the day, never had a good enough lawyer. And that just simmers beneath the surface. I'm 48. That's never gone away. You want it to go away, it never gets away. That's why I do what I do. I'm convinced it was my fate to be here in this moment. Just like her, I told her, your story is just so unique. You didn't want to be in the spotlight. Like my client, Jamie Rose, the same thing. I was like, you didn't ask to be in the spotlight, but you are. Why is it? Why do people care so much about your story? You have to be willing to share it. I mean, Senator Durbin apparently talked about it today on the Senate floor. They're trying to reintroduce the DREAM Act. And I think she was the 150th person whose name he talked about today. And just, all walks of life reaching out to us, people that just, they can't fathom how the government can do this to somebody. I can't either.
Well, that's actually what I'm going to be talking about with Elie Honig, our next guest, to understand how they're able to do this, how ICE is able to do this, how they're not required to identify themselves, how they're able to take it, how they're able to ignore a judicial order. And we're going to talk to him about that. But Todd, thank you so much for the work you're doing. I'm sure your clients are so grateful to you for helping them. And would you please keep us posted on Annie's status and what's happening to her? But for every Annie, there's many, many other people who are being deported and who also were just trying to lead a life here in the United States, and we're working and help,
Right.
working for decades and now have been deported. So I'm going to talk to Ellie now, but I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us and telling us about this case and about your client and other clients you've had as well. I think everybody watching really appreciates it.
I appreciate you as well for being willing to share these stories. It honestly takes a lot of bravery for the press to even have these discussions. So thank you for listening to me today.
Well, I can't think of anything more important than to tell people what the hell is going on, right? And that's our job. Everybody needs to and should be doing it. But anyway, thanks again, Todd, and let's stay in touch.
Definitely. Thanks, Kate. I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, everyone stand by. We're going to get, not end. Sorry, I screwed up. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, now we're going to get Elie Honig on the line. Let's get him, which is, I don't think I've ever met him. I've watched him a ton, obviously. Did I do it wrong? No. Didn't I do it right?
Yeah. Okay. Try that one.
Oh, it's under stay tuned. Do you want me to do stay tuned instead of?
Yeah.
You guys really get to watch the sausage being made on these. Stay tuned. Okay. That's with Preet.
Yep. That's the one he's doing.
Oh, he's doing that? Oh,
Yep.
okay. Does he work with Preet on? Oh, they have a podcast under Preet's umbrella? Got it. Okay. Elie Honig is here, or will be momentarily. Oh, this is my favorite channel, says Julia, who works with us. Julia, why aren't you here at the apartment? Huh? He, waiting for stay tuned. Anyway, how are you all? Thank you for watching. Please let us know other people you want us to talk to, other topics you want us to cover. We're doing this, and you can tell me if you like my new haircut. That's fine too. Hold on. Let's see. He's not on stay tuned. Do you have his text or whatever?
I'm texting with him now.
Anyway,
He's definitely on.
Elie is a former federal and state prosecutor. Some of you have seen him on CNN. He's their senior legal analyst. He's host of the podcast called The Council. I wonder if we should just do it on his. Yeah. There he is.
We're going to try this.
So we wanted to talk to him. Thank you, Lefty Prof. You noticed my hair. Thank you. I don't know. I did. It was very, very impulsive. I just was like bored and tired of my hair. Hi, Elie.
Hi there. How you doing?
So nice to see you. Thank you so
too.
much for doing this.
It's a pleasure to join you. So 2 things before we get into it, Katie. One, I'm not bored and tired of your hair, as I heard you say right when we came on.
Thank you. Thank you.
And 2, I read your book a few years ago when it came out, and I will tell you that I don't know if the right word is scared or motivated or inspired, but directly because of that book, I got a colonoscopy. So I thank you for that.
I wasn't quite sure what you were saying, but I'm so glad you did. And while you're on the subject, Elie, the age is 45 and over now.
Yes.
The age of your first screening, colonoscopy or colon cancer screening has now been lowered to 45. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate, because I want you to stay healthy and well. And I think because what you're doing is super important. You're helping people understand what's happening in the country, the legal implications of it. And I don't know if you were able to hear any of my conversation. I was talking to a guy named Todd Pomerleau, who's representing
Right, one of
a
the
young woman
detainees.
named Annie, right, in who's a student at Babson, and she was deported to Honduras. She was trying to go see her family in Austin, Texas for Thanksgiving to surprise them. And now she is in Honduras, a country her family fled when she was, I believe, 8 years old. So I think, this Todd Pomerleau, who's an immigration attorney, who's been doing some incredible work, raised so many issues. And I think time and time again, as he was talking, I'm sure everybody listening, including myself, were wondering, how the hell is this legal, Ellie?
So, great question that a lot of people have. The first thing I want people to understand is think of the immigration system and the immigration courts. They exist separate and apart from our normal courts, right? And I presume your prior guest laid this out. We think of court cases and legal proceedings, and we sort of think of them all in the same, but it's happening in a different world. The immigration courts are technically located inside the executive branch. They're technically part of the Justice Department. Immigration judges come from the executive branch. That is separate and apart from what we would call our normal courts, our Title III courts with federal district court judges. And so they're completely separate. And if I can start with this sort of generalization, people who are subject to immigration proceedings, deportation, or whatever else, do have some due process rights. The Supreme Court just confirmed that early in Trump's first term with the Alien Enemies Act stuff. They ruled for him, but they said, hey, these people do have at least some due process rights, but they also do not have anything close to the due process rights that we are used to a person having in the criminal courts, a criminal defendant, right? And so many of the things that are based in the Constitution that we take for granted that a criminal defendant would have just don't apply in the immigration context. So I think a lot of the answers I'm going to be giving you are technically not illegal. A change in practice, maybe a bad idea, but there's not often a heck of a lot you can do. I mean, for example, your prior guest, I don't think there's any. I mean, maybe he's got some plan, but it strikes me as an extreme long shot. He'd never be able to get his client brought back into the United States unless there's some asylum or some other thing that they can claim. But it's really difficult when you talk about immigration courts.
So that's really such an important distinction. Having said that, he talked about the judge issuing an order saying that she could not be deported. So is this judge within this immigration system that has that is under the executive branch, or is this judge an actual judge in the criminal court system or the civil court or the judiciary, whatever? By the way, I wish I'd gone to law school. My late husband was a lawyer.
Yes.
He would be explaining all of this stuff to me, but it just doesn't. How can they completely ignore a judge's order?
So this makes it even more confusing. There is overlap. The Title III courts, the regular courts, do have the ability to issue orders that are supposed to be binding on the immigration courts. For example, the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, they're over there in the judiciary, the head of the judiciary. They issue rulings all the time. A bunch of rulings on the Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia case, for example.
Right.
And in rare instances, and I don't know which one of, I don't know exactly what type of judge issued the order in your prior guest's case, but you will see federal district court judges at times in extreme circumstances issuing orders saying, hold up, give this person his rights, give this person his due process. And again, I point to both Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia is challenging his immigration proceedings over in regular courts. But I think even Abrego-Garcia's lawyers understand that even if he sort of wins over there, if he's here illegally, he still will probably get deported. Another example is Khalil Mahmoud, the Columbia student who was detained, largely for his speech, right? Because he was loudly protesting Israel in ways that people may find objectionable, but not criminal. He too, his case has landed over in the regular courts, and they've put some break on it. He's in a little different standing because Khalil is here on a visa, whereas Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia is just outright not here legally.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I still don't understand how they can completely ignore. I don't know I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was a federal district judge, but it was a judge that issued this order prior to this young woman getting deported to Honduras. She was still in the United States when the order was issued. Um, and
Well,
and and are they allowed to just ignore it?
No. And so let me make a guess here. Not knowing the details of that prior case. There was a big controversy early on in this Trump second term, where you remember when he was deporting, what was it, Venezuela's to Honduras, right? With the flights that were taking off. Judge Boasberg had the
But
case.
it was in the air when he
Exactly.
issued the order.
Exactly. And so they said, well, the order,
They said, okay, I get that, but this young woman was in the United
yeah.
States.
If a district court judge, a regular federal judge, said, do not deport her, and then she was deported, it either was a mistake or just an outright ignoring of the federal district courts, which is a huge problem. Which, I mean, I don't imagine that's the case, because I think we would have heard more about it to just have the administration flagrantly, intentionally defy, because the district court does, no pun intended, does trump the immigration court, right? The regular federal courts, if they issue an order, that's binding on the immigration court. So if that order was defied, it either had to have been by mistake or just an inexcusable act of
Well,
defiance.
it sounds like, honestly, and what the hell do I know, Ellie? But that there's a lot of bureaucracy, that these court orders are issued,
Yeah,
that it takes a while to get processed or even received
for sure.
by ICE or whoever's running the ICE show, or Christy Nome. I don't know who it would go to, but this lawyer, Todd Pomerleau in Boston, was kind of saying they don't respond to their emails. And it was, it just almost sounds like it was like a paperwork issue, if you
Right.
will.
Well, I mean, and that sort of gives at times the administration, the executive branch, maybe an excuse, maybe an out, but it's not a good one. It's not an acceptable one. And most districts, I mean, this is why Judge Boasberg is holding hearings now. He wants to get inside and go, who knew what, when, what was communicated to who, when. And if he finds that he was defied, I think he's going to come out pissed off and issue serious sanctions against the immigration judge. So maybe that's ahead in this case as well.
So what do you mean he's going to come out and issue serious sanctions?
Well,
Explain that.
Yeah. So look, when I say sanctions, I mean punishments issued by district court judges. And the reality is
Punishments against who? ICE? Against
yes, it could be against ICE. I mean, it could be findings that they defied his order. It could be referrals for contempt, right? I mean, contempt is sort of the highest level of this, which could result theoretically in prosecution. You would need DOJ to do the prosecution.
Well, good luck on that.
So, right. I mean, exactly. Like, let's be real here. You can issue fines in some instances, but it's largely toothless. I mean, when you get down to it, if you don't have a DOJ willing to prosecute contempt, it's sort of meaningless. But judges, take it seriously. But look, I'm not. This is part of the frustration that I think people have. A lot of times your answer is dependent on the good faith of the political branches, and if that's not present, sometimes there's not much you can do.
Right. Yes. I mean, norms are usually enforced by people who care about norms. And, some of these are not sort of hard and fast laws, right? But they're norms.
I mean, let me play that out. I mean, I was at the Justice Department for half the time under the George W. Bush administration, half the time under the Barack Obama administration. It would have been unthinkable under either of those administrations, or for many years before and some years after, for DOJ to get anywhere near defiance, ignoring, intentional disobedience of a court order. And here we've seen the Trump administration come right up to the line, arguably over, but at least violating the spirit, right? With let's take Kilmar Abrego Garcia, right? He gets erroneously deported. There was an order preceding all this by an immigration judge saying he cannot be sent to this one place, to Honduras, right? I think it was Honduras. Maybe it was Argentina, Venezuela, wherever it was. He cannot be sent to this one country. And they sent him to this one country. And the courts said, they stopped short of saying you have to bring him back, but they said you have to facilitate. That was the word the Supreme Court used. Facilitate his return. Now, you understand what that means. That means help it happen, make it happen.
Right.
And the government, the executive branch, took the position of, we are going to do next to nothing. We are going to, if he should magically appear on our shores, we will make sure.
Well, didn't they say it was going to be, was it Venezuela, you guys? Didn't they say it was, it was up to that country.
They tried that. Yes, they tried that. And then, I mean, of course we could look, yeah, he was staying in a prison, CCOT, that we were renting from them for millions of dollars. That was BS. Yes, they said, well, we can't force him back. And then to make matters worse, they did bring him back, but that was only because they indicted him on a very shaky case. And by the way, that's not how it works. You don't deport someone, indict them, then bring them back. I mean, I had plenty of cases when I was a federal prosecutor where you would indict someone, that person would turn out to be illegally here. You then prosecute them and then deport them after they serve their time. Here they did it all backwards. So this conduct by the administration of, people debate whether it's defiance but it's certainly defying the spirit, maybe not the letter, is brand new.
So the Trump administration is reportedly exploiting loopholes in statutes and regulations in order to proceed with these ICE raids. Can you give us a stripped down explanation of the legal maneuvers the administration is using to justify their actions?
Yeah. So again, keep in mind that the law governing and regulating the way ICE is going to go about its duties is different from the way FBI. It's less stringent than the laws that limit the FBI in the way they carry out their criminal
But
investigations.
can I ask you a stupid question? Why?
Sure.
Why is ICE? Why is it
Yeah.
ICE allowed? Why is there more latitude in ICE's behavior? Like, can't you
Right.
force ICE people to show to show their identification? Like, if a police
Right.
officer came to your door, you can say, "Can I see your ID?"
Yeah.
They
So
won't.
I think the short answer to that is there's a different liberty interest. In a criminal case, you can have your liberty taken away from you. You could be locked up behind bars. In an immigration case, really the worst, and maybe you can argue it's better or worse, but it's a different liberty interest. All that can happen is you can be deported, and only then if you're here illegally. So it's just a different level of protection for a different constitutional liberty interest, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. There are a lot of things that the administration is doing that are right on the line or close line. I mean, you mentioned one, right? The fact that ICE officers are wearing masks. Now, there's no law on this. I know there's been some talk in Congress. Some Democrats have proposed a law, but there is no statute that says all federal agents must identify themselves, cannot wear masks. There are internal regulations at some of these agencies that say, at most federal agencies, that say you do have a generally speaking, unless it's dangerous or there's an emergency, you need to identify yourself. No other, by the way, I've never heard of federal agents wearing masks. I worked with agents who did arrested gangsters, drug traffickers. I didn't do terrorism cases, but other people worked on terrorism cases, never masked themselves. And I don't buy the administration's claim that, well, it's too
They're in
dangerous.
danger.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is a fact that there are ICE agents who are being threatened in ways that are dangerous, wrong, probably illegal. But that doesn't necessarily lead to and therefore we can mask ourselves. I mean, I've known agents who had mob hits on them. They didn't wear masks, right? So can you I mean, the problem really is when you have something like this, that's sort of a regulation, within the agency regulation, who's going to enforce it if not the agency itself? There's not a law that a judge could point to and say, you must wear masks. And so again, going back to what we said before, a lot of this is dependent on good faith and norms. I'll give you another example. Traditionally, again, I was both federal and state. And again, here in New Jersey, I was under both Republican and Democratic governor, Christie and then Murphy. It was widely understood that ICE will not conduct immigration. They can legally, but it was just understood on all sides. They will not go making immigration arrests in certain safe zones, schools, churches, religious, synagogues, mosques, etc., unless there's some dire imminent emergency. And that was just sort of understood, accepted on all sides in the name of fairness and good government and not freaking people out and just, doing things a certain way. That's seemingly out the door now, right? The administration is making arrests sort of wherever they want, but they can, legally, they can do that. And you can't put it this way. If you are here illegally and ICE arrests you at your high school or in a church, you have a valid complaint that what they're doing is underhanded and unnecessary, but you're not going to save yourself from getting deported. You're not going to have some judge say, yes, you shouldn't have been arrested in that spot, therefore you get to stay. So again, it's a rock and a hard place.
We should mention after our conversation, I'm going to be talking to a ProPublica reporter who's been really tracking, thank goodness, the number of U.S. citizens who have been detained.
Right.
And for in some cases, Ellie, for weeks.
So, yeah, and this is a really important point. People, you might be, I said before, you do get some due process if you're subject to immigration courts. So people say, well, if I'm saying you get some due process, but you really can't prevent your deportation, what's the purpose? The point is, first of all, you might argue that's not me. It's a common name. There's 43 people named fill in the blank, right? You have the wrong one. You might argue I actually am a citizen and I should not be held. You might argue I have some protected status. I was granted asylum. I have some sort of visa protected status. And so it's an exercise in due process, but it doesn't have a lot of teeth. Again, if you're here illegally and you have not been granted some sort of visa overstay status or some sort of asylum status, it's really hard to stay here. It's almost impossible to stay here. But you do get a right to at least put the government to some level of its proof. Again, not like if you were a criminal defendant where you would have proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the right to a jury trial and presumption of innocence and cross-examination, all that stuff. That's not the case, but you do have some due process.
I was talking to David from the
Yep.
Atlantic,
Sure.
and he said immigration enforcement should largely be administrative, meaning that officials should be showing up to offices with paperwork to fill out, and that this doesn't need to be done in this violent or aggressive manner.
Right.
You know, I
Well,
guess it is to instill an atmosphere of fear, because that's what it's doing in so many communities.
yeah, I mean, look, there's no question that the way they are doing this is absolutely instilling an atmosphere of fear. I mean, I have plenty of friends in Chicago, in particular, who are, including people who work in government there, who are just, devastated by this. Um, and when it comes to the way they do that, one of the administration's talking points, and I just went on the ICE website a couple hours ago, is we are taking out the most dangerous people who are
I
here illegally.
know.
It's just not true. And you can do that if you do it in a targeted way. They're just putting a fishing net in the ocean and whatever comes out. And the thing that's a little bit duplicitous about this is they go, they're all criminals. Well, okay. It is technically a crime to be here illegally. But that's not what people think you mean. People think you mean you're targeting drug traffickers and violent criminals. And let me tell you one other thing about discretion in the way we do this. Again, when I was at the Justice Department, again, under the Bush administration, under the Obama administration, the worst cases you could get assigned when you were brand new in the Southern District of New York for me were the illegal reentry cases. Now, the Justice Department, under both Republican and Democratic administrations, made a decision. Even though it's technically a crime to be here illegally, we are not going to prosecute people for that. It's just not worth our resources. We only prosecuted cases where somebody had come to the country illegally, been convicted of an aggravated felony, so a crime of violence or a serious drug crime, deported, and then came back. And even those were seen as just the bottom of the barrel. You would groan, oh gosh, I got an illegal reentry case. So government traditionally has said, well, let's focus our resources on the truly dangerous cases, not just on anybody who happens to be here illegally. And so that's a decision. That's a policy. That's an elections have consequences type of policy decision that gets made.
And a change in priorities.
For
Before
sure.
we go, can you just explain the Supreme Court's role, Ellie, in all of this? Because I know
Yep.
they ruled that ICE is allowed to detain people on reasonable suspicion,
Yes.
even factoring in things like apparent ethnicity or speaking Spanish. That just doesn't seem right. How is that not discriminatory? How is that legal?
I'm glad you raised this because this is something I wanted to get to. This was a ruling that came out in September of this year, so 3 months ago. And it's a perfect example of what we started with, how immigration enforcement is different from criminal enforcement, right? What ICE was doing, I think it was in LA, in California, was basically stopping people based on their skin color, the language they were speaking, and where they were. Were they at a Home Depot or a car wash or something like that? In the criminal world, if you're a cop, FBI, NYPD, you name it, New Jersey State Police, and you are stopping people on those bases, that will get thrown out immediately. It's completely unconstitutional, discriminatory. You're done. But in this ruling, which I think came as a shock to a lot of people, Justice Kavanaugh went out of first of all, the court said it's okay. And Kavanaugh went out of his way in this ruling to say it is okay in the immigration context for ICE to make those, to briefly detain someone and question them. But then that becomes the basis to realize they're here illegally and deport them based on, he said explicitly, skin color, language, and occupation or location. And that case got a bit of attention, but it should have gotten more. And I raise it sometimes on CNN. I remember I raised it on Abby Phillips' show, which has 5 or 6 people around the table. There was kind of shock. I think people were like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm sure. Yeah, that's real. That's something." But again, it's a perfect illustration of how there's so much more leeway that the government has in enforcement of immigration than the criminal side.
Yeah, I think people are learning a lot about how different as you explained, immigration court and immigration laws are to other laws. And also Brett Kavanaugh, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he say something like, and if US citizens are arrested or detained and that they're going to be released immediately? And that just hasn't been the case.
Right. I mean, I'll take your word for it that he said something like that. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest problems when you just scoop up people out of, en masse and out of convenience. You're going to end up making mistakes. And again, this gets back to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which was sort of the original mistake. DOJ acknowledged in that case on the record that he was erroneously deported, but then they refused to fix it. And then they indicted him to fix it. So look, you were given, again, I'll just close with sort of something that was put into my head repeatedly when I was a young prosecutor, which is when you take this job, and it applies to immigration enforcement as well, you are given unimaginable power over people's lives, reputations, finances, relationships, and liberty. And do not abuse that power, right? Do not screw up this massive power we're giving you. And certainly applies most obviously in the prosecutorial context, but it as your prior guest showed, I mean, it applies in the immigration context as well. And it's they could do this in a way if they took a minute and they were strategic. They could do this in a way, and they didn't have daily quotas of 3,000 people. They could do this in a way where they identified and picked off the actual violent criminals who were here
Right.
illegally, as they purport to do.
And that's what they said they were going to do,
Yeah.
but then it's turned into something different altogether. I know I'm going to let you go, but I just have to ask you a couple quick
Sure.
questions.
Go ahead.
Why do you think LA Congress hasn't done anything about this? I mean, is that like duh?
I think the obvious reason, probably. I don't think there's a lot of Republican support to go against the president on his immigration, on his immigration initiatives. I mean, what I think Republicans will say is this was the number one issue that Trump ran on. He won. The American people want immigration enforcement, but you are
I
seeing.
don't know. I mean, I
I
think
don't
they
know.
wanted, I don't know.
Well, they may not have
I
wanted it like this. Is the
Right.
response?
They
But
wanted the border. I think they wanted
yeah,
less chaos at the border. Yes, I think people don't have a problem with violent gang members or people who
right.
have committed crimes to get deported, but like nannies at playgrounds who are taking care of kids or,
College
all these
students,
people
sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
it just seems crazy.
I think that's right, but I just don't think the political will is there but Congress can. I mean, look, if the House flips, it's not going to be enough. But if Democrats had control of Congress, I mean, you still need the president to sign a law. But theoretically, Schoolhouse Rock, Congress could put limitations on ICE, but that political impetus is not there right now.
I thought it was also really scary, shared with my team, that the FBI warned in a bulletin, I don't know if you saw this, Ellie, to law enforcement agencies that they have criminals who are impersonating ICE officers,
Huh.
which I think, yeah, and
Wow.
that was
Well,
circulated in at the FBI by Kash Patel. So you have these people who can pretend to be, and if they're masked and they're not showing any identification, they could terrorize people even more, right? I mean,
it's
that's
really
so
interesting. I mean, I'll take the FBI's word for it. When I was a prosecutor, a very common mode of committing crimes, especially armed robberies, is people dressing up as cops,
right.
NYPD. In fact, the first trial I ever did was 3 guys who had fake, but they looked real badges, and they were going to go. Then what they do is they rob drug dealers, and they go NYPD. This is a raid. They take the whatever it is, bricks of coke and the money, and they take off. So it's actually that happens. So it doesn't shock me to hear that. And that's incredibly dangerous when you don't know who's who. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a mess and really upsetting. And I guess to be continued. I mean, do you see
For sure.
anything stopping this?
So this is an answer I've found myself giving more frequently lately, which is I don't think there is a lawsuit that can fix all of this. I don't think someone can go to the courts and say, ICE, you need to start sort of playing by the norms and doing things in a more thoughtful way. I think the solution to this has to come from the political branches. And I know that the response to that is, well, the will's not there. What do you think Congress is going to do? What do you think that, what do you think the voters are going to do? But the answer to that is, well, then you need to win elections, right? And not to be glib about it, but I mean, there are starting to be signs of Congress being a bit more demanding of the White House, right? We just had
Well,
a
I think they see the result of these elections, and now
right,
suddenly they're concerned with their own self-interest and their own hides and not as worried about getting primaried. They're worried
right.
about getting just, you know,
Well,
these
and yeah, I mean, look, just last week there was a bipartisan committees led by Republicans in both House and Senate started demanding answers from Pete Hegseth about these double tap strikes of the
right.
Venezuelan boat. So that to me, I may be forgetting something, but I think that's the first time on a major issue where I've seen Republicans in Congress, both houses, say this is not okay. We need answers. So
Yeah.
will that spread over to the immigration context? I don't know, but it's really you have to think about it in terms of political solutions and policy solutions more than our friend, my friend, and I think yours, Norm Eisen, going in and filing some lawsuit that's going to I mean, Norm's filed hundreds of lawsuits, but there is no lawsuit to force them to start doing things the old fashioned way.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be really interesting to watch. Ellie, thank you so much for doing this with me. I don't think we've ever met in person,
No,
which
no, this is our first time.
seems
So
so crazy to me. I watch you all the time and am so impressed at
thank you.
how you're able to explain kind of complicated legal concepts in a really accessible way. So thank you for doing this, and hopefully we can do it another time.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's really a privilege to speak with you. And you just tell me when I'll hop on with you.
Okay, thanks so much, Ellie.
Thanks.
Okay, everyone,
See you, everyone.
stand by. See you later. Thank you.
How do I
We're
do
going
it?
to finally finish with Nicole Foy. Nicole has been, wait, am I doing this right, you guys? I just want to make sure I'm not screwing this up.
Yep.
Nicole, you all, is a ProPublica reporter. She has been kicking ass on her immigration reporting. She is the person who painstakingly really figured out how many U.S. citizens have been detained illegally. Obviously, that is illegal. And so we're going to talk to Nicole. Hold on, I'm just finding her. Is she just under Nicole, you guys?
That's right.
Oh, sorry, Nicole Foyle. Anyway, I'm excited to meet Nicole. Foy. That's what I meant. Foy. And ProPublica, you all should support ProPublica because they do.
Wait 1 second. Let's.
Are you sure? Oh,
Yep, that's her. That one.
that one?
Yep.
There's a lot of Nicole Foys. How could that be? Anyway,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. But anyway, you all support ProPublica if you can. It is a nonprofit newsroom. They do extraordinary work and they really deserve the support of people who care about understanding what's going on. Just to give you a little info about Nicole while we wait, she's a journalist at ProPublica. She's been reporting on immigration and labor issues before joining. Hi, I'm talking about you, Nicole. Stand by. Before joining ProPublica, she was an enterprise and investigative reporter across the West, focusing on immigrants, Latino communities, farm workers, and inequality. Her recent reporting, and that's what she's here to talk about, found that more than 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration agents. And Nicole, hi, so nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too.
Thank you so much for doing this today, and thank you so much for your reporting on this issue. And your article first got my attention when you published it, or ProPublica published it back in October. So obviously, I guess it was maybe 6 weeks ago or something. So you did a deep dive looking at the cases of American citizens who are being arrested and detained by immigration agents. So tell us what prompted you to write about this topic. And I can only imagine how difficult this reporting was.
Yeah, this is something that I've actually been watching for, tracking, and interviewing people for all year since the very beginning of the year when the Trump administration took office. I had spoken with experts who had pointed out that this was a long problem that the United States immigration enforcement has had, which is that when there's a lot of interest in deporting large numbers of people, inevitably, because of systems and problems that have been not been fixed for decades, citizens get caught up in this, and they were very concerned and warned that this aggressive deportation agenda, these quotas, these sweeps through communities that were not used to seeing federal agents coming through, that it was going to inevitably result in more citizens than usual getting picked up. And so as throughout the year, as we tracked that and as there were really aggressive immigration enforcement sweeps that went through LA and Portland and Chicago, what followed every time were a number of reports of citizens being detained, held against their will, even sometimes when there were videos of them yelling that they were a citizen, that they could prove their citizenship, that they had their passport. But it was happening all over the country.
In fact, you found that more than 170 U.S. citizens had not only been detained, but also, quote, dragged, tackled, beaten, tased, and shot by immigration agents. Tell us a little bit about, I want to ask about how you were able to do all the research that led you to these numbers. But tell us a little bit about the conditions. Is this unusual, or were many of these people treated this way?
I think that there were many of the people that we wrote about and that whose stories we uncovered were treated this way. Certainly not all, but I think one of the reasons why we wanted to emphasize that was because there was this kind of like idealized interaction with immigration agents that the administration, even the Supreme Court, was positing was that, someone approaches you, they ask for your papers. If you have your passport on you or some other, information proving your citizenship, you check it and you go on your way. Sure, that has absolutely happened to people. But the truth that we have seen playing out across the country is that some of these interactions have been incredibly violent, as people have struggled to explain themselves or struggled to prove their citizenship. But also, too, we were seeing a number of citizens who were being detained not so much because immigration agents were doubting their citizenship, but because they were being accused of assaulting officers, of impeding investigations, of getting too close to officers maybe at a protest. And it was really just, again, another natural consequence of these more immigration agents than usual are going into communities that have sometimes been very vocal about not wanting them there. And they have pushed back by filming, by following officers. And many of those people who were charged with assault, there's video evidence, there's even court cases. There's some of those cases fell apart pretty quickly, but they were detained. They were held for days.
Well, I wanted to know, is there an average number of days what is the most egregious example of a U.S. citizen being detained and held by ICE when they should not have been?
I think one of the most egregious examples was a young man in California he was one of more than 20 Americans that we found at the time who had been held for several days for at least a day without being able to contact their lawyer. Their loved ones even knew where they were. A young man named George Rettes, who was a security guard at a large marijuana farm that was raided this summer in California. He was trying to get to work, got caught up in the protest, and even though he approached officers, was asking for help, where do I put my car? Like, I'm just trying to work. I'm not part of the protest. He, in front of cameras, was pepper sprayed. Window of his car was broken. He was dragged out of his car, and then he essentially disappeared. I learned about him, like many in America learned about him, when his sister appeared on TV the next day, begging, crying for information, saying, we saw what happened to him, and he's disappeared. We have no idea what happened to him. He had managed to call his wife on his Apple Watch and say, hey, ICE picked me up. And of course, they had no idea what that meant. He was a U.S. citizen. And he was
And he's
taken.
Julia, who works with me, just wrote
Mhm.
he's a combat Army vet.
Yes, he is. And his car says Iraq combat veteran on it as well. So he he disappeared. He was taken into the federal detention center for several days. He was not given access to a lawyer. He was never told what he was charged with, and he was eventually, after being kept in isolation, not being allowed to shower or even get sufficient medical attention for, the pepper spray was still burning his hands. He was released without charges, and he says without an apology. They never told him what he was charged with until later, months later, actually, the Department of Homeland Security spokesperson tweeted out that he had been arrested because of allegations of assault. That was months later, and after he had been pretty prominently sharing his story everywhere.
So allegations of assault, is this an example of what you're talking about where like an ICE agent comes in and somebody is in the area and maybe protesting them or yelling at them?
Yeah, I think sometimes these were happening at protests or people who were, sometimes like seeing their neighbor being arrested or their loved one
Right.
being arrested and they got involved. But many times now, in many of the cases I have tracked, people who very clearly there was some sort of doubt about their citizenship. There was a young woman in downtown Los Angeles who said that her name was Andrea Velez, and she was being dropped off for work and suddenly was detained. And they said they immediately began asking her about her citizenship and did you speak English, assuming she didn't speak English. But they charged her with assaulting an officer. That was
Even if she didn't assault an officer, they're kind of detain, sort of arresting them under false pretenses.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely can't speculate
Yeah, yeah.
for why, but I mean, that's honestly one of the reasons why when we were trying to decide, like, what cases do we include is like when we were tracking these numbers of citizens detained, it became increasingly difficult for me to determine between whether someone was arrested because of questions about their citizenship or because of allegations of assaulting an officer, because they blended together, especially in many of these chaotic circumstances, and because inevitably, many times after a widely publicized arrest had gone viral, Department of Homeland Security would come back and say, like, we don't arrest citizens for immigration enforcement. That person was assaulting an officer,
Well,
even
you
if
can
there's
see
video
how
evidence. Yeah.
you can see how some like ICE agents would descend on somebody. They're a US citizen. It's a natural thing to be like, get away from me, to kind of, do that. And
Mhm.
that could be, I think, interpreted as assaulting an officer. Who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, I also think too that we're seeing more and more DHS officials claiming that filming or following agents is assaulting or impeding an investigation. That it is absolutely legal to film immigration officials, but have been many cases where those, like, that seems to be why people have been detained, is because they were following as part of a neighborhood watch group or just filming something that was happening right in front of them.
Yeah. And as you said, that's legal, but they're being arrested for it.
Yeah.
Well, you wrote this piece. I know you wrote it in October,
Mhm.
and now here it is, December 3rd. Are you keeping up with this reporting, and have the numbers changed in the days since you first published this piece?
Yeah, I think, it was, when I published the story in October, what immediately followed were several weeks of very intense immigration enforcement with very highly publicized incidents of citizens being detained on camera often, that did not make it into the story, and so that's one of those things that I think from the beginning is I've been emphasizing, like, this is a serious undercount. I am still tracking and covering, this story. I'm very interested if this is something that's happening in your community. I'm very interested to talk to people about this. But we've seen this happen time and time again, and particularly as some of these Customs and Border Protection agents have rolled into different cities. Since Chicago, they've been sent to Charlotte. There are now today reports of a lot of enforcement in New Orleans. I watched a video this morning that I will clarify I have not verified, but there's a woman being arrested on the side of the road in nurses' scrubs, screaming that
I
she was a
I
U.S.
just I
citizen.
s- I saw that video too. It was in
Yeah,
Key Largo,
yeah.
Florida. She was
Hmm.
stopped by federal immigration agents. She was wearing scrubs, and she told them she was an American citizen. I think they did release her, right? I mean, they didn't take her away, did they? I can't even remember at this point. I see so many of these videos.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, a Miami Herald reporter who was on the scene said that she's been released. But, it's a pretty forceful struggle that she has with them, with those officers, and I think that, there's a number of reasons for why people have been detained. It is certainly not always because they are suspected of being in this country illegally. However, I think the truth is that most Americans are not used to being stopped by federal immigration agents in the street and asked to produce their passport. Many people don't have a passport.
Right. I was going
It's
to ask you
yeah.
about that. Like, how can people protect themselves? Should they, what should they be carrying? I know some immigration lawyers are advising
Mhm.
clients about this.
Yeah, and I would definitely leave the advice to the immigration lawyers, but they've warned, just like I've seen and talked to people about, sometimes even having your passport's not enough. Some people are still detained. Detained despite offering to show their passport or showing their passport. There's been many documented cases of immigration agents telling people that, well, this could be faked. How do we know if this is real?
In
I
fact, you found more than 50 cases of Americans who were held because agents questioned their citizenship.
Yes.
And can you tell us a couple of those stories?
Yeah, I think, one case that really sticks out to me is, a case of, a young man, a construction worker named Leo in
And that
Alabama.
was in Alabama, right?
Yeah, yeah, he had his real ID on him. He was filming the arrest of his undocumented brother when the, agents came onto his construction work site, and the way he tells it in a federal lawsuit he eventually filed, he said that, they went straight for the Latino workers and ignored the number of white and black workers who were on the site. And you can hear him yelling in the video, not just, "I'll show you my papers and I'm a US, citizen," but just, asking them, "Why are you doing this?" Like, "I'm a US citizen. I'll show you my papers. What do you want?" And he's still tackled, taken to the ground, and he says that afterwards when they pulled his real ID out of his back pocket, they said, "Well, this could be fake. Maybe this isn't maybe this isn't true." And then a couple weeks later, he was detained again. He was in working, on a house and forced to leave it when an officer walked right into the house he was working on, told him to leave, did not take his real ID as evidence of his citizenship, and he was again detained. And, one of the things that he's said, many times, and he told me, was just that, from his standpoint, this is just going to keep happening to him because it doesn't matter what kind of evidence he presents. If immigration agents want to detain him, then they're going to detain him. He's clearly of Mexican descent. He works in construction, which is an industry that immigration agents have said that they anticipate that there's a large number of undocumented immigrants working in these industries. And he doesn't speak very much English. And so that's just immediately going to make him a target, even though he is a US citizen.
And the Supreme Court said that's okay, that they can use skin color and the fact that somebody is speaking Spanish as a rationale, right? For approaching and questioning and even arresting, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we particularly wanted to address because when Justice Kavanaugh in particular wrote about, that and kind of very briefly touched on the question of, okay, well, what happens to US citizens who fit all of these categories? And he said, he's the one who wrote and said that, if for some reason a citizen is detained, they'll check their paperwork and they'll be promptly let go. And we wanted to show for this investigation that that is not what happens to every single person. You could be detained for days, or you could, leave with really serious injuries from your encounter with
Well,
immigration
I
agents.
wanted to ask you, speaking of serious injuries, as I mentioned earlier and quoted your piece about people getting tased and beaten,
Mhm.
it said shot too. Can
Mhm.
you tell us what happened there? And then I wanted to have you explain if there's any recourse. I know you just mentioned that one gentleman who you were describing, the construction worker in Alabama,
Mhm.
filed a federal lawsuit.
Mhm.
But can these people, is there any recourse when this has happened to them?
Yeah, I mean, so the woman who was shot is her name is Marimar Martinez. She was accused. Federal officials accused her of following officers, of ramming the officers with the car, and a border patrol agent shot her several times, and she survived, obviously, but it. She was accused in court of assaulting an officer until body cam footage kind of very much contradicted much of the Border Patrol agent's statements about whose car had hit who. There was that's a very interesting case that I encourage people to go look up in Chicago. I can't quite remember the what happened with that at the moment, but I think that there is right now not a whole lot of recourse. The federal lawsuit that Leo in Alabama filed is a potential class action suit, just challenging this idea of, there's a number of U.S. citizen construction workers in that area, in that district, who could be facing the same thing of repeated targeting and questioning and even detention by immigration agents because of the color of their skin and the industry that they work and whether or not they speak English well. But other than that, it can be really hard to get recourse. A number of people who have had some of these more violent encounters with immigration agents have filed these like intents to sue and federal tort claim acts. But federal officers have more protection against lawsuits than local police do, which is when it becomes a problem when they're deployed into communities like local police. And on top of that, they're not easily identifiable like your local police officer. There's many times where they're operating in plain clothes, many are masked. And to top it all off, there is, like in almost any law enforcement agency, the internal watchdog that's job it is to take complaints about officers, to investigate conditions, whether in ICE detention centers or the alleged actions of officers on the job. That watchdog has been completely gutted. There are so few people working there right now that it is incredibly difficult to see if there's any type of oversight from inside of DHS, let alone the difficulty of trying to file a lawsuit against a federal agent who was masked. You don't know what agency they came from, and you don't know if their own agency is going to hold them accountable for their actions.
In October, I know that Democrats in the House and the Senate announced plans for a wide-ranging investigation
Mhm.
into the way agents were detaining citizens, these ICE agents.
Mhm.
And this was prompted, congratulations, by your story, Nicole. So, what is the status of that investigation? Is there any action happening on Capitol Hill?
I know that there have still been more calls for the administration and for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem in particular to answer questions about the detention of U.S. citizens. And in addition to that, just the actions of immigration agents as they've rolled into cities like Los Angeles. There was a hearing in Los Angeles that, like, if, I would recommend people go and watch because many of the citizens on my list or who I interviewed testified about what happened to them. And I think that's still ongoing. We'll have to see what happens, but there's definitely a lot of scrutiny on this issue right now. But I will say, like, DHS and the government, the White House even, is still firmly denying that they are arresting U.S. citizens. They do say, though, that they will arrest anyone who assaults a federal officer. They've said repeatedly that this is not happening, even, of course, when there's ample evidence that it is.
Well, again, congratulations for your great reporting. I hope you win a lot of awards, Nicole, for doing this because I don't think there have been really a lot of pieces written about the number of U.S. citizens. Have there? I mean, ProPublica has really led the way in this, thanks to your reporting. And I know that you were part of an investigation into how immigrations were using excessive force, and this was in July of this past summer. So before we go, can you talk about the change in tactics we're seeing in this second Trump administration,
Mhm.
and how it has changed from the previous Trump administration,
Mhm.
or the first Trump administration?
Yeah, I mean, I covered immigration not at a national level, but local level, and during the first Trump administration, and it is anyone will tell you this is completely different. I think the story you're referring to is in July. My colleagues and I wrote about how often immigration agents were breaking through car windows and smashing them, even when there were young children in the car, even when there were U.S. citizens in the car, in order to detain people, and doing this often for people who have no criminal record, no background, nothing that would necessarily warrant, at least to just an average viewer, this type of behavior. And that's something that, quite frankly, like we're seeing across the board, is this treatment. The government is often repeating that they're going after the worst of the worst. And even though we know from data and then from individual examples, of course, too, that that's not the truth, that many people have no criminal record or, may not have even entered the country illegally before their status lapse, they're still being treated the same. And sometimes that means with very forceful, violent tactics that you wouldn't necessarily expect for like a civil violation, which is what many immigration violations are.
And then Nicole, I don't know if you saw this video, but it was ICE agents arrested a man, and his child was in the back seat in a car seat.
Mhm.
I can't remember. I thought the child was 2 or 3 years old. And basically, the ICE agent drove off in the car with this child in the back seat after arresting the father.
Yeah, I've personally seen and reported on a number of incidents that, maybe not exactly like that, but certainly where you're seeing a number of children getting caught up in this or even sometimes detained with their parents, whether they're US citizens or not. I think this is, again, a consequence of what happens when there is such a very, like, a huge deportation push, and honestly, not a lot of guardrails left for officers. It's incredibly hard to identify individual agents who may be like bad actors, and there is very little internal oversight. And at the same time, you've got these aggressive quotas. You're supposed to deport this number of people every week, every day. I think this is simply a consequence of those types of policies.
And I was saying to Elie Honig, who I was talking to before you came on, that apparently there was a memo circulating to FBI agents saying that criminals were impersonating ICE agents and, sort of terrorizing these communities even more than the ICE agents themselves, who are also terrorizing the community, which is really concerning. Have you heard about that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and some of them have been arrested and prosecuted, but also, like, I think it's why you still see a number of advocates or just neighbors who, like, they call people. There's so many records of 911 calls from people calling and saying, somebody's getting arrested by masked men who I can't, their car's unmarked, they have no uniform on. I'm calling 911 because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. They have guns. They're acting like the military or police, but I can't prove that they're police. And I think that the administration has very often dismissed these claims as just being like a talking point by activists, calling them kidnappings. But when that happens on your street in the middle of the morning while you're taking your kids to school, it that can kind of look like a kidnapping, and I don't, and again, it's one of those things where, like, I don't think you can blame people who, suddenly wake up in the morning and see this happening to their neighbors or loved ones and don't know how to react because the government is not being incredibly transparent about why they're doing what they're doing, or even about whether they really are only targeting, the worst criminals possible. That it is simply not true. They have detained many people without criminal records.
Well, Nicole Foy, I can't thank you enough. Ever since your piece came out, I've wanted to talk to you about your reporting and what you've seen. And on behalf of everyone watching, thank you so much for this reporting. Keep us posted. How can people support ProPublica and the work you're doing?
Well, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and so I think definitely following our work, supporting and being a member, like it helps us do journalism like this. We think it's incredibly important to ask questions and hold the government accountable, and so supporting our work and following it helps us do that.
Well, hopefully a lot of people watching this will. And again, I'm grateful for you giving us, you were fantastic. Can I just say that?
Thanks. Thank you.
Anyway, thanks so much, Nicole. And I think that's it for us. I have to do something for Jose Andres tonight. So I am going to sign off now. But again, thank you so much. And for everyone watching, thank you. If you all please follow ProPublica, I'm going to let you go and I'm just going to say bye to everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Nicole.
you.
If you guys can, as I mentioned, support ProPublica. If you could also support us by becoming a paid subscriber. I always feel like such a weirdo asking you all to do that, but it just helps support our work as well. And the team that helps me organize these shows and book the shows and do the research for the shows. I always say it takes a village, but it's actually true. So again, thank you all so much for watching. Please give us feedback, what you like, what you don't like. As I said, people you'd like me to talk to, topics you would like us to tackle. We're really doing this hopefully to help create an informed citizenry, which is so essential to a democracy. And we really appreciate you all being here and watching and being part of this community. So that's it from me. I will see you all soon. Thanks again. Bye.